Hey, Sean, welcome to the Tuesday night stream. This is another one of those interesting ones where if you come in the middle, it may be a little hard to follow. This is probably going to be easier to watch from the beginning, but this is what we're doing tonight. So thanks for hanging out. If you can't hear my audio, I'm sorry, but I have a feeling that the audio is better tonight than it is when I use that little wireless deity microphone. Tonight we're talking about this problem that I had, and this was the fourth time in my career that I've used the solution that we're talking about tonight. And hey Jay, I was just about to talk about you. The first two were accidents and sort of got lucky with some stuff. The third time was Jay's suggestion, and it worked out really, really well on a video we did in Powell Hall where the St. Louis Symphony plays. And then the fourth is what just happened with an interview that I shot. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me pull up Final Cut here. This is a still from the interview. This is our wide shot. And we're not going to talk tonight about why we're in a conference room, why we were late, why we had only about 25 minutes to set up, why we had to go so quickly. There's a lot of variables here that were beyond our control. But the main thing was that this setup, we didn't have any lavs, and I don't like using lavs without a sound person, without Jay. But I wanted these two booms because we really wanted good audio, especially of the guy on the left. The guy on the right here, this is Chief Mark Bayshore from Florida. There is no imbalance in the colors here. This is a Florida fire chief, what a Florida fire chief looks like, and this is what a Michigan fire chief looks like as far as complexion is concerned. So we needed to mic them well, but because we were shooting this wide, like it's fine in the, let me pull up the, like this is the tight, and there's no mic in the tight. There's no mic in this tight, but in this wide, where did the wide go? In the wide, we can see both the mics, and there's just nothing we can do about that. If we zoom in to the point where this is where these mics are cropped out, we then have this really weird frame where we have even more table in the shot than I wanted. So this is what we were going for, and we needed to hide the mics. And so what Jay suggested that we do for the St. Louis Symphony, we did again, and that is, and I'm going to do this live for us here, but I'm going to pull up a timeline, and I'm just going to drop this clip, not the tight, the wide. We're going to drop this clip onto the timeline. So here we have, let me turn on skimming. Here we have this clip of them conducting this interview, and something happens at the end here where, come on now. Oh, I know what I did wrong. We need to have this entire clip. Excuse me. There we go. 31 minutes. That's better. All right, so we've got this clip with this whole interview going back and forth, and we need to get rid of these microphones. And what we did at a point was took a break and lifted the mics out of the shot. So you can see we're fumbling around. I'm trying not to hit people here. And so we just literally raised the mics up until they were out of the screen. And the key to doing this, the key to pulling this off, depends solely on whether or not you can keep your camera perfectly steady. If you can't keep your camera perfectly steady on a tripod, you're going to have a really hard time doing this, depending on your background. In most situations, you're going to have a really hard time doing this. But so what we did was now we've got this clean sort of plate back there, and I'm going to press Option F, which if we zoom in is going to make a single freeze frame. So now this whole clip is just a freeze frame of this dramatic moment between these people here. And so what I'm going to do is take this whole clip where these microphones are, and I'm going to just mask out the microphones. So pull up my masks. I'm going to draw a mask around these microphones. And I don't really have to be this careful, but might as well. So masking that out, let me pull up this thing, and I'm going to invert the mask. So now we just have this giant hole where the mics was. But if we take our little freeze frame here and put this underneath, and we'll change the duration to 30 minutes. Now we've plugged that hole. If I make this disappear, you can see there's a hole here. But underneath it is this clip of these dudes just sitting there, freeze frame, like nothing's moving. And so that patches that hole. So now the mics are missing because we've just cut a hole and taken the mics out, and underneath it we put this little clip where we moved the mics out. And so pretty cool, pretty neat. And then there were a couple other issues. You can see there's a camera over here on the right side of the frame. That lens was poking in the whole time. And so in this little freeze frame, looks like I took the wrong freeze frame. Let's see, I bumped the camera out here. Let's replace that. We'll take this freeze frame here. And there's our freeze frame. This is the one we'll use. Change this to 30 minutes. We'll get rid of this one and slide this over. All right, so now we've got the same situation happening up there. But there's something else I want to cut out. I want to cut out that camera lens over there on the right. So I'm going to come back over here, add another draw mask, and I'm going to mask out this camera. And once again, if I invert the mask, now I have, you can see when I remove the background plate, I have another hole over there, but I'm putting this frame where we got everything out of the way, put that in there. And actually in the final video, you can see there's this little shadow over here that was from the boom arm, just faintly over here, and it was just bothering me. I don't think anyone was really going to notice it. But in my final version, I also masked this out, which you know what, we'll just do it anyway. Might as well, while we're doing all this, for the purposes of the demonstration. All right, so now that's gone too. So you can see that I've cut 3 holes in this where there was a camera, a shadow, and the microphones over their heads. And I've just put behind that a plate from when we lifted all those things out of the frame, cleaned things up. And because the camera didn't move, and only because the camera didn't move, does this little trick work. Now, where we got even more ambitious was with these two dudes doing this interview. The guy on the left was telling a really, really cool story, and the guy on the right was interviewing him and doing an incredible job. And at the end, we needed like a really, really short version. But the guy on the right, Mark, Chief Mark, had to leave. He had a flight to catch, and so he had to leave before we were done. And so what we did, if we come here to the end of this now, you can see Chief Mark had to leave, and then I am sitting in the seat. We actually moved that camera in a little tighter because what we did here was I'm going to take this frame, and for the time being, I'm just going to crop the right side of this frame. And as I drag this over, nothing's happening because I'm clicked on the wrong thing. As I drag this over, I'm just getting rid of me. And we'll go to about there. And now I have this clip of Chief Kurt Nass talking, doing a wonderful job, but he's talking to me. And so if underneath this, I can take this same clip and find a moment in here where the guy on the right is being thoughtful and pensive, we'll just take the whole thing for right now. We'll just copy this, paste it there, and I'm going to pull this on top of it. So here, if I get rid of these here, you can see here's my frame where I am missing. This is just where it's chopped out completely. And then we actually need to take this clip one more time and add a mask around just his microphone. Whoops. Make sure we get the whole thing. We'll invert that mask. All right, so now we've got the hole there and the hole there. And by putting underneath this these two clips, first the clip of these guys from earlier where they're talking and nodding and moving, and then patching those holes with that clean plate. Now what we get is, again, at this moment, it's just Chief Nass talking to me. But when we bring these things in, now, while it's not synced up the content, I have this footage of Mark over there. So when I'm going to play this here, and let me mute those two clips. When I play this, you can see that the guy on the left is talking, and we've got nodding and agreement from the guy on the right. And it looks like at some point someone reached over here. So things like this need to be cleaned up a little bit as he's gesturing. But overall, this is the effect that we've created, where we have two guys talking even though the guy on the right isn't there anymore. And so, yeah, technically you can do it. With camera movement, but it's pretty insane. This is not something that we sort of knew about going into it. Like, oh, we'll set up and we'll make sure this was an on-the-fly situation. Like when we saw this room for the first time, 25 minutes before we had to press record, it was a stressful situation. It was a little tough. So by deciding this quickly of like, there's not going to be a better way to mic this, we need to hide these mics. We'll get the clean plate afterwards. I thank Jay for the idea, because that's exactly what we did. The same thing. We did this, like I said, in Powell Hall. We hid a microphone that was over somebody in the middle of a stage. So we wanted all this headroom, but we also wanted good audio. And so we put a mic right over her head, and then also got a shot of no mic with nothing moving. Actually, there was a tiny bit of movement in that shot. Like the camera it wasn't moving, but it had moved slightly. And so I had to bump things over when I patched that hole a little bit. But it worked. It worked, and it looked good, and it sounded great. And I'm going to post this video, or I'm going to deliver it to the client later this week. But the audio from those microphones sounds fantastic. And it came to life because we were able to get those good mics close to their mouths and then clean up the frame afterwards with a little bit of this Hollywood magic. But again, this is the shot that's actually the majority of the meat, and then it's showing over here. The audio is weird because it's not synced up. So the last thing I'll have to do to solve this problem, it's not a problem. The last thing I'll have to do to make this work is make sure that when I cut to segments of the guy on the left talking, that I choose moments and sort of scrub along on the right, the guy on the right, to find moments where he's being pensive and thoughtful and clearly listening to something. And I prepared one tiny little shot here. This is a completed version of this, where I've sort of doctored some things up and reveal stuff, but I'll play this little 30-second beat out so you can see what it can look like when it all comes together. Here is, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but the audio sounds good. I'll turn the mic so you can hear it.
Our department was toned to a house fire at 3:30 in the morning. Normally at that time, I'm going to get a full crew, 18 to 22 firefighters. In this situation, it didn't happen that way for whatever reason. I only got 5 on an incoming engine, which that's normal, but the 5 that I did receive were non-experienced crew, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, a couple rookies. So with the SAM system,
so you can see that when it all comes together, by choosing moments where there's nodding and understanding, it's very natural. And I think there's a way to do this unethically, but we knew that this person was, I mean, we didn't want to put anyone in these seats that wasn't there. We wouldn't be making someone agree to something they're not actually agreeing to. But what was happening in this particular situation was we had done a very long version of the interview. The guy on the right did an amazing job of interviewing the guy on the left, but then he had to leave, and we needed a really, really condensed version of the story, still as though it was told. So it was no new information. It was just a shorter version, and sort of forcing those more concise answers. And we were able to do it, even though the guy had to leave, by cropping some things and patching holes and making sure we had some clean plates of the video frame with nothing in it that we could use as this backdrop patch. So that is what we were doing. That's how it worked, and I'm grateful that we took the time to come up with this idea. I've also done stuff like this. I said I've done this 4 times. The first 2 times were accidents where the boom, one of them, the boom was in the shot, and I didn't realize that I had a bunch of things going on, and I did a bad job, and the boom was just in the shot. And thankfully, it was in front of a pretty blank wall, and so, excuse me, and so I was able to just like cut a mask out and then take the same frame and just offset it so that a different part of the white wall was covering where the boom was in the shot. So I did it that time. That was the very first time I had done it. And then another time I got lucky, but we had like stage curtains in the background. We were shooting in a theater, and we got away with it there too, where the boom pole, like we had 2 people on this crew and we were holding up cue card. We had all this stuff going on, but the boom pole had slowly fallen into frame, like whatever wasn't tight enough. And I'm glad it never just let loose and hit anybody, but the boom just slowly came down into the shot until it was right above their heads. Audio sounded great. Audio sounded so much better at the end of that than it did throughout, but in front of that curtain was tricky, but it was just complicated enough, and it was just subtle enough in the background that if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't notice it. And I'm sure if you went back now and watched that video, you'd be like, oh, something funny is up with that curtain. But on the day and to your average viewer, they're never going to notice. And even as I look at this frame, I need to clean it up a little bit. You can see there's a little seam right along here where you can see the edge of the crop. It's like slightly darker on one side. And I don't know why that is, but it was driving me a little crazy. So I'll probably blur that a little bit by using that crop tool. That's just a harsh line right there. And so you can sort of see when I do that where that line is. But it sort of blends in like it's part of the wood grain, part of the backdrop. You don't really notice it on the table so much. It's just on that background. But this worked. And I'm really happy about it. And it's one of those situations where you do your job and then you look back. Yeah, feather the seam. But it's one of the jobs where you look back and you say, I'm glad that we had the patience and composure to come up with this in the room, because this is a situation where I have seen other people faced with similar situations freak out and make weird compromises, and things can go poorly. And because we had a great crew, we were able to leave the cameras untouched. We pulled this off, and I'm really happy with it. That's all I got. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. Any tips you've got? I'm sure there's better ways to do this than the way that I did it, but if you've got any tips at all or ways to shoot this, throw them in the comments, because I'm always happy to share the knowledge. And I will probably at some point do this again and make a non-live, like a more edited version of this video. So if there's any tips that you've got, I will absolutely include them when I come around and do this again a little bit more patiently. That's all I got. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Good quick masterclass indeed from the expert. Have a great day, night, whatever, wherever. See you later. Bye.